All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you on Zoom and on YouTube, welcome to the People's Forum. For those of you joining us on Zoom, please post your questions using the Q&A button below. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, please use the live chat function to ask your questions. Also, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for updates on our latest videos. Today's event is a book talk and panel discussion with contributors to In Defense of Julian Assange. This event is much larger than a book talk because of what is happening presently, as Julian Assange is now facing the third week of his extradition trial. I'll pass it on to Anya, who will moderate our discussion. Anya is the host of Red Lines on the Gray Zone. She has produced and presented several documentaries, including on-the-ground reports from the Korean Peninsula, Venezuela, Honduras, and Palestine. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you, David, and thank you to the People's Forum for putting this event together. I don't think it's possible to overstate the importance of the Assange extradition hearings, which are currently underway in the United Kingdom. And I'm saying that not only as a journalist who understands the grave implications this precedent could have, this persecution of Julian Assange already does have for all of us who work in media, but just as a person who really came into journalism because I wanted to expose the wrongdoing of our elite, and also because I believe in justice and wanting to improve the conditions of the world. And anyone who even just has that basic belief should feel invested in the outcome of this trial. And it's been very disappointing to see the lack of coverage we've seen of the Assange trial in the United States in particular. So I think it's very important that the People's Forum has put this together, and I'm very honored to be hosting these guests that we have lined up today. We have Margaret Kimberly. She's a columnist for the Black Agenda Report. She produces the Freedom Ride blog. And we have Nathan Fuller, the director of the Courage Foundation, and Renata Avila. She is an attorney and also a friend of Julian Assange. The Courage Foundation, as well as Margaret and Renata, contributed to this book, In Defense of Julian Assange, which I have right here. It also includes essays from Noam Chomsky, Chris Hedges, Stefania Marizzi, John Pilger, people who know Assange intimately and people who just support his case or support him in his struggle because they understand the implications this could have for all of us. So I encourage everyone to purchase a copy of this book if they have not already. But we will start by hearing some opening remarks from each panelist. We'll start with you, Margaret. If you have any statements that you feel as though you want to lead with. And also I thought, just so there was a common thread to each of the opening statements, that in addition to whatever statements you'd like to make, if each panelist could explain why they personally became involved in advocating for Assange and why they personally see the outcome of this case and Assange's freedom as something that's so important to each of them. So Margaret, I'll pass it to you first.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I have been a defender of Assange and WikiLeaks ever since I first heard their names. As soon as I understood that this man and this organization were determined to bring truth to the people and give us information that governments and corporations did not want us to have. That's a good enough reason to defend anyone. In my prepared remarks, I'll go into greater detail about how Assange ended up with very few supporters in this country, people whose political opinions would ordinarily cause them to defend a whistleblower. But a combination of factors, the fact that he's blamed for Hillary Clinton's loss, plays a huge role. The smears and lies against him play a huge role. But I am not surprised, but disappointed and saddened by the lack of support he's gotten from the media. He is, lest we forget, charged with espionage for revealing the Iraq war logs, which show journalists being killed by US troops. That should be enough reason for people to come to his defense. The way the law, the way Ecuador's government was manipulated, the way the UK is violating its own processes and its own laws are enough reason to cause concern. The fact that they are severely limiting the number of people who can attend the hearing, that journalists are being restricted, that the location is physically difficult to reach, the fact that he is being kept in a glass box like a criminal, are all indications that this is a person who ought to be supported by all of us, by people who write and speak and who claim to care about informing the public, should all be on Assange's side and against the side of this vast criminal enterprise, which is being invaded against him.
Thank you, Margaret. Now we'll move to Renata Avila. As I mentioned, she's an attorney who has worked with Julian, knows him personally. And so Renata, if you can speak about how you got to know Julian. I know you write about this in the book, In Defense of Assange, and also your opening thoughts.
Yes, tonight I don't want to be the lawyer. You will read a lot about the legal analysis and the complexities of the case. There's daily reports being produced by those monitoring the trial, by lots of legal commentators, by Courage Foundation and other organizations. Today I want to share this as a friend of Julian. And I think that as Julian's friend, it is a very different take, and something that I think that we do talk in a past talk, Anya, is how different the things were 10 years ago, how different actually the things were 13 years ago when I first met him. And it was this very hopeful and festive, tense, very tense, because of course activists trying to change things from different, very complicated countries and contexts, were already facing a lot of harassment and a lot of persecution. But there was this sense of hope and unity, and this belief that information in our hands will be powerful. It will be something showing the full facts to people, showing the full data to people. People will realize, I have been lied to, and I will not allow less information than all the information that I could have available. And I was one of those dreamers, and Julian was one of those dreamers. And we didn't only in our communities, we understood technology as something that we needed to control somehow, and whose control should be decentralized and distributed among citizens and among people in different parts of the world to make it resilient and to make it ours. And that was the beauty of WikiLeaks. If it was not this greedy spirit of having the breaking news and the exclusive only access, only point of view of a set of documents, but it was this distributed journalism that will make it more resilient and more scientific. And it started very small, and it never got so big financially. WikiLeaks have never been a $1 million, billion-dollar media empire. But the distributed power and the novelty of the methods and the technologies that Julian created made it so resilient against censorship, more resilient against censorship than any Western media ever. And the innovations that Julian and his team pushed to protect sources are innovations that media are using right now. And there has been nothing groundbreaking in journalism.
Renata did warn us that she may have some difficulties with her Wi-Fi. She's in Berlin right now, but struggling a bit to stay connected. So if she doesn't come back in the next few seconds, I'll just move now to Nathan Fuller. He's the director of the Courage Foundation. I'm sure Renata will be back soon and we can hear the rest of her statement. But Nathan, I think it's definitely true what Renata said, that the political climate has changed so much since Assange and WikiLeaks first became international names in an organization that we're all aware of. Now, in the United States, he's really, and we can get into this more later. I know particularly Margaret has written about this. He's associated in some ways with the election of Donald Trump in really an unfair way, I think. And that's led to a lack of support for him among the liberal elite journalistic class, in spite of the very serious implications his case poses for any publisher. So Nathan, if you want to share your opening remarks and also explain why you and the Courage Foundation believe that Assange's case is so important.
Thank you, Anya, and I sure hope Renata comes back soon. But yeah, I've been thinking about the political climate of 2010 and how important it is that people realize that people who have come to political consciousness in just the last 5 years might only know that about WikiLeaks and Assange and only associate them with this 2016 story. But when I first came into the story, it was actually through his most famous source, and it was from an anti-war angle. That was my only real political activism, was opposing the wars. And I was in college in 2010 when these leaks started to come out. Collateral Murder came out, and I would just tell everyone who would listen about it. And then the war logs came out, and the cables came out, and at the time we didn't even know initially the name of this brave Army intelligence analyst who leaked this information, but I felt just an enormous gratitude to that person, someone who put their body on the levers and the gears and the wheels of the war machine the way I hadn't seen anyone do before, and that was just incredibly inspiring. And that's certainly how I feel about the publisher. But so I got into the Chelsea Manning Support Network and covered her trial, her court-martial trial in 2013, which is also when Ed Snowden made his leaks and his asylum in Moscow. And that's why we started Courage, was, we saw how Snowden learned from Manning, and we wanted to prepare for the next whistleblower to learn from Snowden, to have this safety net ready. And it turned out that the Obama administration prosecuted more whistleblowers than everyone before him, not just anyone before him. So we had several beneficiaries who were helping these sources, but we really want to help everyone on the information supply chain. So that's the source, the hacker, the reporter, or the publisher. And what we who have supported Assange and WikiLeaks for these 10 years now have been warning for a decade. The reason he was in the embassy has finally come true. This war on whistleblowers has escalated into a war on journalism, as we all thought and warned and were called crazy for saying would happen. And so just in that same way that I felt a great duty to pay back this debt of gratitude to Chelsea Manning, I think Julian Assange has given information to and assisted court cases in and inspired activists around the world. And this is just a little part that I can pay back by just appreciating his contributions to journalism and helping him get free. And so a little bit later in the talk, I want to talk about the way that that anti-war activism has actually now come back into his trial, which I've been monitoring remotely and reporting on live.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. We're lucky to see Renata has popped back up. And I believe right before you cut off, Renata, you were explaining that journalism, the media, haven't really produced any scoops or breaking news stories on the level of what WikiLeaks brought us. I don't know if that's exactly what you were getting at, but if you want to finish your thought. And also
I want to give attract to that. Sorry to interrupt you, but what I wanted to attract to the attention of people is that in 10 years, I mean, I have followed this case each and every day of my life since Julian surrendered to the police in London, you know, in 2010. And in 10 years, we haven't seen much of courage innovation on the technical aspect of journalism. I mean, there have been very courageous stories and persecution against independent journalists, financial persecution, political persecution, assassinations all over the world increased as never before. But like the resilience of the platform that Julian designed with his privileged mind, the resilience of a decentralized platform and a permanent library that's uncensorable, and a distributed strategy of publication that makes it uncensorable, uncorruptible, and what you can visit without being influenced by the stupid algorithms that prioritize some information above the other, like and play with your mind. That's what you still find in WikiLeaks. And the second thing that we still have is the ability to communicate with sources securely. And that's what's at stake right now. That's what's being discussed, and it is written in the indictment. The Department of Justice wants to punish and wants to destroy the possibility of innovate in on how journalism operates at a global level. And there's very little discussion about that. And there's very, it's a non-issue even. And it is terrible because it's not only journalism at the technical level is stagnated, but all these conversations about fake news and our democracy being stolen and so on, you had the formula, US, you had the formula 2000 when WikiLeaks was launched, and when it showed its power to show people facts and to show and to have distributed journalism that will make sure that no media was hijacking because of some breaking news and agenda and taking unfair advantage of facts. It was any citizen able to read the full document and make up, of course, with the context that different media organizations were given to any given document, have an opinion about it. An unfiltered opinion that was not pushed by algorithms or was not decided on a back room together with the government officers or the corporations that were exposed in the documents. So it was quite innovative, and that was what attracted me to WikiLeaks, because I come from a country that systematically lies to the citizens, has very lazy journalism that looks more and more like advertising, and very little credibility. And I thought that this very inspiring global way of doing journalism was the perfect tool against corruption, but also the perfect tool against apathy of people. And now it turns out that 10 years later, the rest of the world looks more and more like my country looked back then. And the deep corruption, it seems that it expanded, and it's very sad because we we are precisely in the moment that we need people like Julian the most out, trying to figure out how somebody who understands the internet so from the very beginning, and that understands the darkest phases of journalism and how deals are made and how tied the hands of journalists are in big media organizations. That's precisely the kind of person who could be like helping us out here right now. And that's the person who's being punished publicly the most. But as we see him punished, please don't stay with that image in your mind, because the image that I want all of you to have during this trial is the image of Julian Assange publishing, having in his hands, holding in his hands the documents exposing the most horrible human rights violations. Because I don't want you, US citizens, to and people in general, I don't want you to think of a defeated person. Think of this courageous person who standed up against power, and think that we want that person back, and that he is still there and is still that person. And we will do whatever we can to restore the right of all of you to be that person one day as well. And because that's what is at stake. I will be like, I want him to walk out with his right to publish. I don't want him to walk out because of the inhuman treatment or because of health issues. I want his right to publish restored. That's what I want. And that's the person I met, and the person I know is still there with full potential, in spite of all the abuses that he has endured.
I think all of us would like to see that, and certainly we saw the bravery Assange still maintained while he was trapped inside of Ecuador's embassy in London, which was still a phase, I believe, of his detainment. He was still publishing, he was still working, because I'm sure, as you would say, Renata, that seems to be just who he is. It's what he cares about. And I agree also that we need someone like him now more than ever. I saw today in the Washington Post, the top story was published by a reporter named Josh Rogan, and it was just a blatant CIA assessment published in the Washington Post to say that Russia was probably influencing a campaign to hurt Joe Biden in the upcoming election. And so you just have journalists acting as stenographers for these organizations such as the CIA, instead of challenging them the way Julian did. And so that really was his only crime. He actually did what a journalist is supposed to do, instead of acting as a stenographer the way these journalists who are failing to stand with him do every day. Margaret, you write in your book that once Assange involved himself, or in your contribution to In Defense of Julian Assange, that once Assange involved himself in the 2016 presidential election, he was doomed. And I think that gets back to the theme we were talking about earlier, how there's a lack of solidarity for him now because of the election. So I'm wondering if you can expand on that and how we can counter that in the minds of people today.
Well, yeah, it's very strange how this all turned out. First of all, I'm going to assume that our viewers are well versed in some of this information. So, but some people may not be. We've been told since 2016 that Russia hacked the Democratic National Committee and gave these documents, these emails, to WikiLeaks. What we know now, only if you are a serious viewer of the news, is that no one hacked the DNC. Even the Democrats, their consultants, CrowdStrike, testified under oath that they had no proof of anybody hacking the DNC. There was already evidence that the download speed indicated information being loaded onto a flash drive, meaning a leak, and that is WikiLeaks. That's what they do. They get leaks from people who want to pass on information to the public. But we have been lied to so much by these people, as you describe them, as stenographers. And we don't know these very basic facts that are not in dispute are known only to a handful of people. And because the corporate media operates the way it does, you have to search for yourself. If you read the Washington Post or the New York Times or listen to NPR or MSNBC, you don't know what you need to know. You have to know who to follow on social media, which websites to go through, be diligent about it, and then you will know some of the things that that I just mentioned. So Assange involves himself in the campaign, doing what he should have done, telling the world that the Democratic Party, I guess it's small d Democratic, not real Democratic, that they rigged their primary, that Hillary Clinton was concerned about her own involvements with the Russian government, or rather her husband's, and that she labeled Trump Putin's puppet as a way to protect herself because she was involved in a transaction he did with the Clinton Foundation, giving plutonium to Russia, which ended with him meeting with Vladimir Putin and getting paid $500,000 to give a speech. So that is the truth that had to be revealed. But we live in a country where people are propagandized. And I think Democrats are actually more susceptible than Republicans, quite frankly, where Hillary Clinton was portrayed as this, it was her turn. And Donald Trump was, well, he is an awful person. I'm not trying to dispute that, but that she was not awful. And that she was good, that he was bad. And when she lost, Julian Assange became persona non grata for many people who ordinarily would protect whistleblowers, who talk about the need for ACLU and other organizations that defend our rights. But now, having involved himself in the election and having become the target of all this anger, all the trauma, I think Trump's election was a trauma. I don't think I'm overstating the case in saying that. And so he is to blame, not Hillary Clinton's campaign of amplifying his candidacy because she thought he was the easiest one to beat, not the rigging of the primary against Bernie Sanders, the man who could have beaten Trump. I believe definitely would have beaten Trump. None of those things matter. All that matters is this terrible man. And of course you keep smearing him. Then you say he's a rapist. Then you say any number of criticisms about him, and he became the villain. He is the villain of the story, second only perhaps to Donald Trump himself. And this makes it, and now he's been disappeared. His hearing, the extradition hearing in London, is getting very little attention in the corporate media. Once again, you have to know this handful of people to follow. And so that is it's all quite terrible, and it doesn't bode well for our future as people who want to know what's happening in the world, as people who should want to be the citizens we're told we can be in democracies. Now we see this man who is vilified and persecuted because he had the nerve to tell us the truth, to expose people, and to show us clearly who they were.
Yeah, from the very beginning, it's very clear that there's been a coordinated campaign from day one to smear Assange in some way or another, and that just really came to a head after 2016. Nathan, you've been following this trial, this extradition hearing so far, and I'm wondering if you can just explain for viewers how the court has made it difficult for journalists to access the hearings, and also what have the main takeaways been for you so far? I know you mentioned the fact that Assange's anti-war activism is actually coming into play here. Why is he on trial?
Sure. So there's a lot in there, and they've made it difficult for journalists and for NGO observers, because they really want to limit the access that we have to this hearing. So we watched this hearing on a remote video screen, just like a live stream. But on the first day of the hearing, the judge announced that she was revoking access for 40 people who previously were granted access to that live stream. Those include German politicians, Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders. These are people who observe legal trials all over the world without issue. And for some reason, they're not given any good reason other than that the judge has the right to do so. Their access has been revoked. And so that's limiting the spread of this news. But yeah, so Assange's activism has been on trial a bit, because it matters that he is a political actor, that a political offense is alleged here. That's there's a bar against extraditing somebody for a political offense. But I also want to talk about what I think is the one good thing that happened with Julian Assange being on trial, and that's that U.S. war crimes have finally made it into a courtroom with people representing the U.S. actually in court. You know, we've got to hear journalists, professors, historians, and activists all talk about why these releases were so important, the horrific crimes that they revealed that we would never know about otherwise. And one really amazing thing happened, which is that a victim of CIA torture and rendition, Khaled al-Masri, had his statement read about what happened to him. And it's truly just gruesome torture at the hands of 13 CIA agents. He was kidnapped in Macedonia and taken to a CIA black site. That statement was read aloud in court with members of the US government and lawyers representing the US sitting there in court. And so now, as al-Masri said in his statement, this is not justice. You know, the US is still not a party to the ICC, but as he mentioned in it, they threaten families of ICC members who would cooperate with war crimes tribunals. But it was something closer to justice than we've ever seen before. And the prosecution did not want that read in court. They did not want to stipulate to that statement because it said the US government tortured him. And it also said that WikiLeaks releases proved that a German prosecutor had wanted to issue an international arrest warrant for these CIA agents, and the US pressured them not to, or to issue it in a jurisdiction where they weren't living, so they didn't actually apply to them. But that would only come out because of Julian Assange's releases. We also heard from Dean Yates. He was the Baghdad bureau chief with Reuters in 2007, which is when the killings and collateral murder took place. And two of his fellow Reuters journalists were murdered by US gunmen from this Apache helicopter. And in this statement, we heard about how he spent years and years trying to get that video from the US government and US military, but he was stonewalled. He wanted to find out what happened to Namir and Saeed, who were killed in that killing. And something that I never knew is that he actually blamed Namir before WikiLeaks release came out for peering around the corner of a building and inviting suspicion. But then when WikiLeaks released Collateral Murder, he said the only person who picked up on the fact that this was technically legal, that what the soldiers were doing in that video were looking for a reason. They were, you know, in the video you can hear them say, "Come on, buddy, all you've got to do is pick up a gun." The only person who picked up on the fact that this video is documentation actually of a war crime being made legal in real time was Julian Assange. And so Yates and al-Masri, they thank Assange as they thank Manning, and so many people affected by these releases around the world thank them both for showing the world the truth. But really it's showing the American people the truth. You know, Iraqis and Afghans know what the US military is. This is about showing the people of the United States the truth about what it means when they vote for warmongers and war criminals and for the military-industrial complex to rule their country, and that this is what they're supporting, and that this is what has to stop. And none of that would have been possible if it wasn't for WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And so it should be the CIA agents who tortured al-Masri and the military gunmen who murdered Namir and Saeed, who should be in the glass box in the back of the courtroom where Julian is right now.
It did seem to catch the prosecution by surprise that the actual crimes of the United States were on trial, or at least in the courtroom as a result of their persecution of Julian. Renata, I think sometimes people, because of all of the focus on the 2016 leaks, forget everything that Julian and WikiLeaks are responsible for bringing to light. So many of the crimes of the US government exposed. I'm wondering if you can remind people of some of the key leaks and cases WikiLeaks brought to light, and also explain something else you mentioned in your contribution to the book In Defense of Julian Assange, which is the model, and you touched on this earlier, but what was really important to Assange, which is source protection and integrity.
Yeah, so just to mention few, and it was not only the set of logs documenting the wars, the U.S. wars, but it was also the diplomatic cables and this video, but also the Guantanamo documents, which, I mean, it is incredible. Obama passed. Trump is about to finish his term. Guantanamo prison is still there and is still torturing. And it seems that everybody forgot. I think that after this conference, it will be like this online conference. It will be very good if you go to the WikiLeaks site and read one of pick one. It's horror stories right there that no journalist take and follows up every year to see what's happening with these people in those documents. After that, it is very important because WikiLeaks didn't only expose things about the US. It has exposed things about different actors in power. For example, it exposed before Snowden's revelations came out. It started publishing a series of documents documenting private spying companies. WikiLeaks was the first in partnership with Privacy International and other civil society organizations, exposing the surveillance, illegal surveillance that we were under. And just to mention other, it also exposed private intelligence companies that were doing more than just open source intelligence gathering, that were having privileged access to sources, but not on the public interest, privileged access to documents, secret and restricted documents, but not on the public interest, but only on the interest of the powerful who could afford that kind of access. And that's very important. It's a very important thing to remember that when they say like highly sensitive documents, super secret documents, that's not true. Actually, like millions had access to that database that they allege that is super secret. And so, but of course, if you are selling cables to private intelligence companies, is not a crime. If you expose it to the public, it is a crime. And those revelations showed a pattern of transnational corporations using this kind of information to attack activists, to harass social activists, to harass even victims of terrible corporate abuses. That also was exposed by WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks exposed Syria files. It exposed a whole set of documents about the Saudis. I mean, it really it had exposed so many, from the Saudis to the Vatican to Sony corporation. It has exposed so much about so many people in power that it had managed to upset so many powerful people, but it had managed to do so much good on exposing corruption and dirty deals are not the monopoly of a state. It is a very complex, systemic pattern of behavior that crosses borders and that connects somehow the powerful elites around the world. And what Julian was trying to do by documenting it, and by not only like he hates this of the big news of today become the forgotten past so quickly. Like basically what he did was to create this database where you can connect and link and realize that actually the only way that we can reverse this machinery is by understanding how it operates and how it connects. And you cannot connect. It's very sad that in the era of information and big data and all these sophisticated systems, you go to a newspaper or you go to a search engine and you cannot make sense of the information. That is deliberately done and built in a way that doesn't tell you the story over time, that it forgets so easily, you know. And with WikiLeaks, when you search any document, it's really easy to track and to see how connected and how consistent and decaying is the behavior of the political elites. And I think that it is not only the decentralized publication and the media partnerships that Julian created, regardless political orientation, regardless views. I mean, one of the things that he was more passionate, and he's more passionate about, is pluralism, media pluralism, which is something that we are losing completely. And I remember that, for example, the WikiLeaks cables were not only the monopoly of The Guardian. Some on January or February, around January and February 2011, the most conservative media in the UK also received a set of cables related to the UK. And in that moment, it was really amazing that you will see even the most conservative media in England, when they were given the chance to explore the stories, and they knew that the other side knew that they had access to the same stories, how that unfold a process of peer control on making sure that the other side was not self-censoring themselves. So it really improved the quality of journalism, because if you know what the others, I mean, your competitor in a given media market, if you know exactly what they are not publishing, then it is a big pressure to the other side. And I find it fascinating. I mean, it was really a golden era for journalism and for collaboration and for citizens, because citizens, instead of getting in this absurd, absurd polarized things over small things, 2011 was the year where we saw people in the streets of so many cities around the world protesting, demanding accountability to the 1%. And that's forgotten now. I mean, that's completely forgotten now. Where did it go? Where did it go? This combination of facts, realization of this very corrupt elite, and then this big push of people in the streets demanding accountability to those they should demand accountability to that 1%. There was a composition of not only, it was not an attack on the US at all. It was actually a full exposure of global elites operating all together, all united, and the people uniting against that model. And that's why it was considered so dangerous. And that's why so many resources were dedicated to try to destroy him. But he's still alive and he's still fighting, and WikiLeaks is still publishing. So very resilient.
Yeah, and it is true. It was a golden age for journalism and protest. I hope we can get it back. Now that we're coming on the halfway mark, I just want to remind people that they can submit questions through Zoom, but also if you are watching on YouTube, You can submit questions in the chat there and I will receive them. I'm turning now to take a look at some of the Zoom questions viewers have submitted. And I have one from Ann Batiza. Margaret, maybe if you can tackle this one. She says, slowly, some media seem to be waking up. The Young Turks has now come out in support of Julian. John Nichols and Katrina Vanden Heuvel have tweeted out in support of Julian. Matt Taibbi is in the book In Defense of Julian Assange. He has covered the case, the recent hearings on his Rolling Stone show. He interviewed Juan Passarelli, a journalist and filmmaker. How can we encourage greater on-the-record support from those who have not written about this trial, Margaret? And why do you think, even still, there is a lack of solidarity from journalists, even in alternative media?
Well, the lack of solidarity is it's because these people aren't really journalists. I mean, when you think about it, the video from Iraq, as Nathan just pointed out, showed the killing of 2 journalists. I mean, if anything else should bring them to defend Julian, it is their colleagues being killed in cold blood. But unfortunately, too many journalists are career climbers. In order to get those in an industry that's shrinking, those few jobs, those few good paying jobs, you don't rock the boat. So all of them become stenographers. The corporate media means you amplify the needs of the corporate world and who work hand in glove with the state, with the United States, with the UK, with Australia. So that's why they don't say anything. They're not real journalists. They're not serious about it. Yes, I believe in giving credit to those people who have reported on Julian's case, and we all have to just keep doing what we are doing. Every time we write about him, every time we point out the injustices in his case, every time we point out the lies, every time we do that, we are helping him and we are helping ourselves and dare I say, helping the whole world. I mean, it can seem like, it's our 10 best friends in a bubble, but I don't think that's altogether true. I think we have to keep plugging away and yes, and give credit to those who are doing this all important work. And I think in general, we have to be critics of so-called journalists all the time. We have to call these people what they are. So many of them are just propagandists. That's why they get paid, 7 figures a year. They're not getting paid that much money to be truth tellers. So when someone asks you, did you watch Rachel Maddow? Say, no, I don't watch Rachel Maddow because she's just a propagandist and I'm not interested. So in our own way too, we have to just speak these truths.
Nathan, Anne also asks, how will the Courage Foundation, or will the Courage Foundation, reach out to radio stations in the US to tell how the trial is exposing many of the lies we heard perpetrated and spread about Julian over the past decade, really? I'm sure you guys are making an effort, but I imagine it's hard to always break through with the media.
It is definitely hard to break through, but I am trying to get onto some radio stations and get the word out more widely. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to record or make any recordings or even screenshot the live stream video of the case. So we can only write about it. And I want just people to know, if you don't, that I am the director of the Courage Foundation, and we have a new project here in the US, which is AssangeDefense.org for this new US committee for Julian Assange. And we're trying to increase support here, but also just demonstrate how much support there already is. We know we have branches in Los Angeles, in New York, in DC, in San Francisco. There are people out there who want to get involved. And so check us out on this website, AssangeDefense.org. And if you want to start a branch or get involved in one near you, please get in touch. But that's also where I have the live blogs from the daily reports from the hearing. And I just want to note that the prosecution's claims are getting batted down right and left throughout this case. The idea that WikiLeaks is to blame for the unredacted cables being released in 2011 has been completely shot down by every witness that's come forward. The idea that Assange didn't care about names getting published or didn't try to redact these documents is getting just blown away by the people who were there with him at the time in 2010 working on these documents. And so it will become very clear after all of these arguments by the US are just batted down by the defense really thoroughly and comprehensively from experts in the field. If he is still extradited, that the ruling will have been pre-written essentially. So it's really worth following the ways in which the ways in which this is happening.
Renata, there is a question from YouTube that I think you would find very important, which is there anything individuals can do to support Julian besides sharing news and creating awareness on social media? I know it's difficult for people to take in all of this information, see this great injustice carried out really in their name, and then feel as though they're powerless when it comes to helping Julian or showing solidarity. So what can you tell us about ways to show support?
I know that many of you are in the United States and you vote. And I think that I know that there's the elections is a super sensitive issue for all Americans right now. But I think that that vote should be a vote with a condition, especially people in Congress. If condition your vote for the political party you are voting to have a stand for free speech. I think that the best that can happen. I don't want, as I said, I don't want a pardon as an act of charity of especially coming from Trump. I don't want a refusal to extradite in humanitarian grounds. I mean, I want his freedom. Of course, if we can get it, it's great news. But what I want is that this sacrifice of 10 years restore the right to publish. That's the most important mission. I know that he's a human being and he's a father and he's suffering and all of that. But I want all that suffering and all that persecution not to be in vain. I want the US to take a principled decision of just squashing that case, just closing that case and closing that case as a solid, a principled act by the next administration saying this country is a free country in spite of all the things that we can say, and it will not prosecute somebody because somebody prosecutes a person because a person is publishing the truth. I think that's if we manage to convince politicians that it's so costly that it would be like absolutely unacceptable politically to continue this case, then we all win. Julian wins and we all win. And I think that's what we should aim at. Sadly, Bernie Sanders was never bold enough to say this. And at the moment, I mean, we can see the leading candidates, but maybe in the Senate, maybe in the Congress, maybe even local governments, if we line up powerful people saying that it's unacceptable and that the case must be closed, I think that's the way to save him and to save him all this extradition process. It will continue. It will continue to the High Court. It might continue even to the Supreme Court. Then it might go to Strasbourg. And then, life passes, but very fast. And that's not a life, the life that he's living at the moment. And also democracy is deteriorating globally very rapidly. So it is not only protecting him, it's also protecting the people who are, with doubts, or should I publish? But if I publish this, I will get in trouble like Julian did, and my life is going to be misery. Is all the courageous journalism that is not as courageous as Julian is not happening because it's calculating, will I take that risk that we need to save? I think that that's what individuals should do, and that should be our goal. Our goal is to close this case. Our goal is to make miserable the life of those pushing that case forward. Our goal should be like make those journalists supporting this persecution and this prosecution feel ashamed and feel like, like people shooting in their foot. So that's what I think that individuals can do. Use your vote, use your political power, and be like, be that flying in front of the politicians and demanding that they do their work on protecting your rights, because it's not only about Julian's rights, it's about your rights.
Margaret, Mark Looney submitted a question asking what media sources are best to follow concerning the Assange extradition trial. I know Renata added an answer saying WikiLeaks. Definitely everyone should follow WikiLeaks. But I'm wondering if you could recommend a few other sources and also give your take on what you think people, citizens, average citizens should do in order to support Julian.
Sure. Consortium News is doing great reporting. There are people in the courtroom like Craig Murray. You should check out his website. A good media analysis site is fair.org. The Gray Zone is great. Black Agenda Report is great, where I write a column. Oh, I know I'm missing people. Oh God, that's so terrible. I hate when I start mentioning people. I know I've left someone.
Put you on the spot.
Yes, I know.
Kevin Gostola is another great source.
Kevin is reporting. Thank you very much. So those are some of the people who are reporting on the actual hearing. But I think, I think those are all great sources all the time. Everyone that I have just mentioned, plus others. So if you follow the sites I've just told you about, you will be in good stead knowing about what is in the news. And I would say that I wanted to mention something that Renata said, talking about elections. I think Americans have to acknowledge the lack of democracy in our country. The two political parties are of one mind when it comes to certain issues. Democrats may vilify Trump, but when it comes to imperialism, they go right along with him. I think our activism has to be foremost in our lives, and any electoral results will follow as a result of what we do in working with people here, showing solidarity around the world. But that's the other reason they're persecuting him, It's just to try to tell everybody, well, this is what happens. It's like the modern day equivalent of sticking a head on a post. This is what happens if you question. And I think by that can in turn silence people. But that's why it's important for us to follow everyone I mentioned. Courage Foundation, so sorry. Or books, they've got good books. That you follow those of us who are here and others I have that I have mentioned, because so far they cannot control what it is that you read. So far.
Thanks, Margaret. I just want to once again encourage anyone joining us online to submit questions and be a part of the conversation. Nathan, if you want to add to what Renata and Margaret have said regarding sources to follow and actions, concrete action people can take.
Sure. So one of them you mentioned is Kevin Gostola, and he has put out a little guide to follow the hearing as far as, you've seen lots of people complain that the mainstream press is not covering this. And I think the implication of that post is that the mainstream press is going to do what the mainstream press does. Let's amplify the voices who are covering it. Let's, make us the mainstream. Let's, these are people who have been reporting on this for years. Kevin and I were two of very few reporters who are at every bit of Chelsea Manning's hearing, and now we're covering every bit of this hearing because it's something that really matters to us, and so we know it inside out. It's not just the stringers who drop in for the bigger days. So I definitely encourage you to check out that post at Shadowproof. But yeah, as I said, really want to expand in the United States, where we hope Julian does not come back. We want to expand support here. And so really encourage you to get in touch at AssangeDefense.org. You can see the live reports I've been doing. And I tweet at Defense Assange on Twitter. I try to do not quite a transcription, but just as close as I can get to what's happening in the court to try to bring that to those who can't see it. So check out these sources, and don't just, when the mainstream press is falling down on the job, don't just complain about it. I mean, we should hold them to account for not holding to their own principles, but let's raise these voices of those who are there all the time.
Absolutely. And I've seen some Twitter accounts really making an effort to tweet at individuals in the media and politicians, also urging them to speak out on Assange. And it's worked in some cases. I think the Young Turks felt pressure. And so that's a tool. I think if you listen to your local radio station and they have a call-in session, you might as well call in and speak out about Assange, ask the station to pay more attention to his case. Renata, from what I understand, this week we're going to be hearing more about Assange's health and his treatment behind bars. And I know that a major component of the case is to make the point that he would very likely, we can almost guarantee that he would be subject to cruel and unusual punishment in the United States if he were extradited here. We know that the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, already ruled that he's been subject to conditions of torture. Can you talk more about the conditions he's faced and what we know about his health as of late?
We will know, I mean, many of these reports will not be public, actually. I think that is the most sensitive issue for the court, and I believe that it will not be public access, and even it might even, like, reasonably, some of the private aspects of his suffering might be restricted, which is okay. I mean, it always happens in the trials. But I think that is an excellent opportunity for, I will combine your question with the previous question because I forgot to say something. It's an excellent opportunity for people. Like I feel afraid that we are too trapped into the social media bubble, discussing the things related to Julian. And what happens is that it's the same, if we do an analysis of how information flows and who is listening to this, it is somehow, I feel like we are preaching to the convinced. So my invitation, as you follow this week, what is going to be revealed on his treatment and his health and what he might face in the US, is to write a letter. You can write letters to the editors, actually, in most of the countries, and especially to the mainstream media in the US, and say, like, oh, by the way, I'm sure that everybody, each and every newspaper has reported on using documents that WikiLeaks published, most of them, at least the leading ones. So it would be very interesting to do an exercise, the following exercise. Write a letter to the editor and say, like, I noticed that you have, like, been partner of WikiLeaks in this and this and this publication. And I also have noted that you are not reporting that the editor, your colleague, the editor of WikiLeaks, is facing this and this and this and this situation in prison. I wonder why aren't you reporting about it if you are partner of this media organization? That helps us remind people that WikiLeaks was doing what the main newspapers were doing, remind the newspaper and expose them in their, like, you know, inaction of, and their passivity and in their cowardice of not publishing anything about it, and highlighting, like, you know, the human aspects. Because if you write the letter to the editor about an editor who's suffering torture, maybe there will be some degree of empathy and some even if a small commitment to write something about it, and keep the exercise going. The hearings are going to stop like in 1 week, maybe 1 week and a half, and there will be like a long silent period. Now we have a little bit of overload of information with so many testimonies and reports, very intense. But we can use as well during this time, as the judge is considering what to decide, we can use this precious time to take that material and keep writing keep sending letters to the editor, keep trying to get opinion columns on local newspapers, keep trying to get this out into mainstream media. Why mainstream media? Because we can guarantee somehow that it will be listened to beyond our social media bubbles. I know that I'm not a big fan of mainstream media, but it's a way to burst the bubble somehow. And it's just a suggestion, because what we are going to hear in the next week and a half is horrible. It's truly horrible. And it is something that even if you don't care about free press, if you care about humanity, you will be like willing to do something to stop the suffering of a person who contributes so much to society.
Margaret, there have been a lot of questions along the lines of how can we pressure mainstream media, corporate media, into covering the Assange trial more. Definitely writing letters is one great way to do it, as Renata explained. But you actually write in your contribution to the In Defense of Julian Assange book, which again, everyone should buy if they haven't already. It's got great essays explaining why the case of Assange is so important and what he contributed to journalism. You write that there would be no reason for a WikiLeaks to exist at all if Assange didn't know that the corporate media have very direct connections with elites and with intelligence agencies. They have no intention of divulging anything the public really needs to know or allowing anyone else to do so if they can possibly prevent it. So do you think, in what ways do you think it is possible to break that bubble?
Well, I say we create our own bubble, perhaps not rely so much on trying to debunk theirs or break inside of it. We need to work, be very committed. I know everyone here is. We need to be committed to creating our own media and always support it. Support it financially, support people financially who want to tell the truth. You know, we've gotten used to getting free information on the internet. And now we see paywalls spring up, and I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. You used to have to pay to read a newspaper. But those are things we have to be accustomed to doing. I think we also have to be activists. I don't think it's enough just to write and to speak, because this is a political issue, and we're living in a time of political crisis. And I think we have to be, we have to break out of our own bubble of thinking it's enough just to write and just to speak. So we have to be involved in organizing anything, and it could be any issue that helps to bring about democracy. It can be on prisons, it can be on the environment, it can be any number of things. But I think we're at a stage here in this country where it's very clear that people are going to have to save themselves. The political system isn't going to save us. The Supreme Court isn't going to save us. it's us. And we all have to take on different tasks. We all have to be politically active outside of this duopoly, which has this terrible incestuous relationship. One day they hate each other, but then when it comes to military spending, they're all on the same page. When it comes to Assange, they're all on the same page. They don't even speak up, the Democrats, against Trump's, fascism that we're constantly told about. They haven't said anything about him. So I say create our own bubble, amplify our work, support others who do, and be ready to be active. I think we've reached a point where we really don't have a choice in that matter.
Nathan, in the Defense of Julian Assange book, in the Courage Foundation's contribution, they say that if the US succeeds in prosecuting the publisher and editor of WikiLeaks for revealing information the US says is secret, it will open the floodgates to an extremely dangerous precedent. Not only will the US government immediately seize on the precedent to initiate further prosecutions, states the world over will follow suit and claim that their secrecy laws must apply globally too. How much of a threat do you think this is if Assange is extradited, if he is prosecuted here in the United States under the Espionage Act? The book also includes a list of all of the outlets and journalists who worked with WikiLeaks to publish its information. Will those individuals be at risk?
They absolutely will, throughout the US and around the world. And so Julian Assange has been charged under the Espionage Act, but he's already been told that he does not get the First Amendment protections. So the First Amendment, because he's a foreign national, so the First Amendment ends at our borders, they say, and the Espionage Act is for around the world. They get to dictate what gets published about the US government anywhere, no matter what, just because they don't like it. But I really see it as it's the First Amendment or the Espionage Act. One of them is going to survive this trial. And if we want it to be the First Amendment, we have to stop this use of the Espionage Act equating journalism with spying if we want the First Amendment to live. We've heard already from several experts who have studied the history of the Espionage Act and the way that it's been used against dissidents. And even in its horrible history, it has not ever prosecuted a publisher successfully before. And so that's why we called it, even before Assange was arrested, we wrote this, the Assange precedent, that this is, this is their wedge into a full, to the end of the First Amendment. And it's very telling that it's Julian Assange. They didn't go after a Charlie Savage, a Barton Gellman, because that is, a New York Times or Washington Post type reporter who would immediately get, swarmed with support. They went after somebody after they had already spent nearly a decade smearing him as someone who has blood on his hands, and it doesn't matter what turns out to be not true so many years later when we find out the truth, because the character assassination is done. And so that's why they use somebody who they have tried to make unpopular as the person with whom they set this precedent, because it's just easier for them. And so we need to combat that. But it's really important that people understand that this is the end of the First Amendment. What is the point of the First Amendment if it doesn't protect publishing? It has to be defended.
You want to add to that?
Yes, just to add to that, remember it's online publishing, and that's very important as well. If most of the assets of the so-called internet, free internet, are controlled by the US, and this right is squashed, the implications are going to be terrible. And I mean, and as the war against China escalates, and as all is splitting, the implications go well beyond just investigative journalism, and it will open a door, a very dangerous door, on this absolute this imperial power expanded even more from the US. And one reminder is that it's very uncertain which Supreme Court of Justice, if the case, touch wood, will not. But if the case goes to the US and is examined by the Supreme Court of Justice, is it going to be like the most conservative court ever, the one destroying your First Amendment? That's why the case needs to, like, die now. The case needs to be closed now, because we cannot risk the future of journalism with a case that will open any possibility of abuses, especially as sadly the US enters a very complicated time. And we might want to remember that the US is not exempted of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 19 and the right to publish. There, international law matters, and it seems that like this obsession with the First Amendment is important, but let's obsess with international human rights as well. And it is clear there, and so it will not only be a case against the Constitution of the United States, but against our global constitution. And so I think that it's important to remember that, because it's not only the right to truth and the right to know of Americans, it's the right to know and the right to truth from all of us, and the right to publish from all the journalists all over the world online.
I'm wondering if any of you can speak about what exactly the Espionage Act is, because we hear about it, but I think a few of us actually understand what it is. I'll let whoever, if they want to signal, feels comfortable tackling that.
Anya, you are asking us in the last 10 minutes the most technical and complicated and boring question. I think that it is something so old, so out of fashion, like so anachronic, so not applicable to today's globalized world, where we work as interdependent. Actually, the US is the one that had pushed this interdependence with foreigners in all aspects of life, and is an old law that sees the other as the enemy, and sees actions, any interaction between US citizens with foreigners as potential suspicion on this, that might open a door of any criticism or any collaboration involving these very, I'm not explaining it very well, but let's just say there is a very old law that doesn't have a place today, that it was done to protect things that made sense, not even made sense 100 years ago, and that is being twisted and pushed into a situation that is just a simple act of journalism, and that might be another vehicle to save Julian, trying to reform that law, maybe, but it's too late. Yeah.
I know we're keeping you up late, Renata, so I appreciate you tackling that question. I think we're coming up on about a little less than 10 minutes left in this panel event. So I'm looking just to see any final questions people have submitted. There's a theme, if we want to start with closing remarks, questions about framing this case as the Trump administration directly targeting Assange, how that's come out in the court during these hearings, but also based on the statements of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who, after all, is the one who declared that Julian Assange has no First Amendment right. I'll start with you, Margaret, and we'll just go down the line to close.
How's this being framed? It's interesting to me how these people who are ordinarily so hated, everything they say is just accepted. because it's Assange. I wanted to say something else about the Espionage Act. I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'm going to digress a little bit. But the Espionage Act is World War I era law that was hardly ever used until Barack Obama resurrected it in order to punish anyone who revealed information he did not want. And I think it's important to say where, you know, Trump is bad and Obama is supposed to be good. Like every other president, Trump has built on his predecessors and on what they have done. It's Obama that is in effect, even though they took a pass on prosecuting Assange, he is the one who in effect gave Trump and Pompeo that power. And the Espionage Act, I believe it just makes it illegal to reveal anything that is supposed to help America's enemies, something to that effect. And some people have argued it's unconstitutional. So I think I'll end with that statement.
Nathan?
Yeah, I'll just add another major problem of the Espionage Act that's worth discussing is that it does not allow for a public interest defense. And this is why Snowden continuously says he would come back to the US if he were allowed a public interest defense. But you're not allowed to even talk about your motives. You're not allowed to say why you released this information, why it's so essential to inform the public about what was happening in secret. Daniel Ellsberg tried to do it at his own trial before his case was eventually thrown out, and his lawyer was astonished in court that he was not allowed to argue motive. It's what they call a strict liability defense. It's just offense. It's just, did you know that this could harm what we say are America's enemies today? And it's an incredibly low bar for an incredibly high sentence. Each count carries 10 years in jail, and that's why, if convicted or if sent here, Assange could face up to 175 years in prison, just the way that they've charged this. So it's, as Margaret says, Obama really revived its use against leakers, and Trump is building off of that and escalating it. So yeah, as far as the framing, Obama kind of set it up, but declined to prosecute, leaving the way for Jeff Sessions to come in and say that arresting Assange is his priority, Pompeo to call, to lambast him in a speech for the CIA, and then for Trump to allow the prosecution as soon as he was opportunistically done with them after 2016. So this is a really dangerous law that, and this is the perfect time to stop it. This is its worst use yet, and it's time to be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Renata, if you want to close by discussing the framing of the case, but also reminding people, something I like to ask you to do is remind people of Assange, the person, since you're his friend, you can add some of that personal perspective that I think people would really appreciate hearing right now.
This is a marathon. We are in the first mile still. It's going to be like very, very long process. And I think that we need to keep that in mind, and we need to keep growing the support base as it scales, as you are cheering people in the marathon, we need to keep the spirit of Julian up. And the spirit of Julian up is not going to be kept up by us saying, oh, poor Julian, you're suffering so much. Of course, show empathy, but write to him, if you want to keep, not only advocate for him tirelessly outside, but try to write to him or about him in prison, and try to send interesting things that can keep his mind active. Tell him what the things that things that are happening that upset you the most, or the most interesting things that you have discovered, or try to keep that channel of communication. And even if you just heard about him, try to show some respect for his work, or go into WikiLeaks and keep using WikiLeaks and keep sharing WikiLeaks content that will keep him happy. I'm sure that, it is his passion, keeping alive that place, and keeping alive that place for you to use it to change the world. It is one of the things that he had dedicated most time to. And I think that's as much as we can do. Of course, donate to his defense fund. That would be very appreciated by his family. And again, I think that we need to see and we need to let him know that we understand that it is not saving him, it's saving the big picture, saving us, basically what we are doing by defending his case. And do not be indifferent, please. Even if you just set up a reminder on your telephone or on your computer of saying something about him every 3 days, like it would, if we consider all the people watching this, it will make a real difference, because it will we will not forget about the issue, and we will keep it active until the next peak. And the next peak is going to be like the decision of the court, and after the decision of the court, the high court. And for the high court, we need to have a solid base, solid support. And solid support is not built overnight, but we can certainly build it once the US election passed. And once the US election passed, we need to make the life, as I said, impossible of these politicians. So somebody takes the initiative and we start trying to close this case. So that case in the UK does not need to even continue, and he can go back home. That's the goal.
What is the timeline we expect for this? Just to clarify, since you said the High Court.
Yeah, let me explain. In the case of Julian already passed because of the Swedish case, a similar timeline. And what I can say is that in the case of Julian, the rule is the exception and the exception is the rule. If the court can rule, if a period is not defined by the system, if it's convenient, it will be quick. If it's convenient for those oppressing him, and inconvenient for the defense. If it's on his favor to have something quick, then it will last forever. They will take until the last day available possible, unless it is politically convenient to release the decision quickly. But what some people who had monitored this kind of procedures said is that we are talking even 6 months until we have a resolution from the court. And after, it can be, again, it is very variable because it's a unique case and it's a political case, it's not a regular case. But the evidence is so much evidence that they need to go through that it might take even 6 months. After that, there's the appeal to the High Court. Again, very long period. And after the appeal to the High Court, there's another period of time, not so long, it's shorter, to in specific circumstances to go to the Supreme Court. And here we are only speaking about the extradition proceedings that might go even to Strasbourg and last a long time in Strasbourg at the European Court on Human Rights. And only then, the case will, if all fails, and if there's a political decision, because another phase that needs to happen in the UK, political decision to extradite him by that time, then he arrives in the US, and only then the case starts in the US. So imagine, it's endless. We can be talking only the extradition process to last 3-4 years. And then the case in the US. That's why my petition and the center of all advocacy we do must be to kill that case now. We cannot wait. We cannot passively wait and hope for the best of the justice system, because the justice system has consistently delivered decisions against him. So the only decent thing to do is to advocate and to get enough political support to close that case.
As you said, Renata, it's a marathon and we're only in the first mile, which is why I am so grateful for the people who joined tonight and understand that it's necessary we all invest our time and energy into supporting Julian Assange and defending Julian Assange. I want to thank the panelists tonight, Margaret Kimberly, Nathan Fuller, and Renata Avila, and of course, thank the People's Forum and David for putting this together. I really miss having a space to gather and to see all of you in New York. You guys are such a great organization, but I hope that whenever this lockdown pandemic situation is over, that we can all unite there once again and hopefully one day celebrate Assange's freedom. I think that's what we'd all like to see the most. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to the panelist participants, and thank you to the People's Forum.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you.
Thank you,
People's
Anya.
Anya.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Good night.